Hi, I'm Mike Powell, world record holder in the long jump, 29 feet, 4.5 inches. I've also won 2 world championships in 1991, 1993, and also 2 silver medals in Olympic Games in 1988 and 1992. I've been coaching now for 8 years. For the last 2 years, I've been here at UCLA. Today, we're going to talk about the long jump. We're going to break it down to 4 different sessions: the approach, the takeoff, the flight, and the landing. Let's get ready to jump. Before we get started, let's figure out who makes a good long jumper. First of all, you need somebody who's fast, then also somebody who can jump pretty high or far, and then also somebody who's athletic enough to take that speed and take into the air and land without killing themselves. First, let's talk about the approach. Now, the approach is 90% of the jump. It determines your speed, your rhythm, and your accuracy at the board. Now, in future DVDs, I'm going to talk more about running mechanics, but in the approach, your running mechanics are really important, so I want to emphasize a few points that you want to work on with your athletes or with yourselves. First and foremost, you want to run on the balls of your feet. This is the springiest part of your body, and you want to have a nice springy, bouncy run when you're going down the runway. Also, you want to make sure when you hit the ground that your foot hits directly below your hips. You get the most power there and get your hips up as high as possible. You want to have your hips high throughout the run and at takeoff, because speed times height equals distance. Now also, you want to have your hips tucked underneath you. You don't want them going too far forward or too far back. You want them in neutral position underneath you. Same time, you want to have your head over top of your hips, so a straight line going from your head all the way down your torso to your feet. And also when you're running, make sure your arms are going straight forward and straight backward, from the shoulder height down to the hip pocket. Any movement going across the body is going to slow you down. The more time you spend on the ground, the slower you're going to go and the less high you're going to jump. Okay, one more thing about running mechanics before we get into the jumping. Dorsiflexion is really important in sprinting and in jumping. Now, Grace and Chris here are going to help me give you an example of how important dorsiflexion is. When you're sprinting, you want to have your knee get to this position as soon as possible. And what helps you get there quickly is to dorsiflex. That means pick up the toe, as opposed to plantar flexion, pointing the toe down. So pick up the toe, that activates the hip flexor and the gastroc and get the knee up faster. Now, to show you the difference, you want to provide force going up. And to show you the difference between dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, I'm going to show you right now with Grace. So Grace, hold on to Chris. Lift up your right leg. Okay, now first we're going to put her in a plantar flex position. I'm going to ask her to resist. I'm going to push down, and you see that she can barely resist me. Okay, now lift the leg up and go in a dorsiflex position. Now hold, and you can see how much stronger she is. I put almost all my whole weight on her body. So when you're sprinting, it's really important to dorsiflex first, because you can get your leg up faster, and when you're jumping, you can get your knee up faster and block faster. So dorsiflexion is really important. I covered it here a little bit, but wait for the sprinting videos, and you get a lot more from that. Okay, so before we get started on going down the runway, we got to start with your check marks first, with your walk-up. Now, when you first start your approach, you can do it 4 different ways. You can do it standing, and then just start running, similar to what like Carl Lewis did. Now, that was kind of difficult for me because my steps were inconsistent. I like to have a rhythm going into my run. Then you can do it walking, take a few steps walking like this, and then go into your run. Then you can also do it skipping a little bit into your run to develop a little bit of speed. And then also you can do it running. Also, you find a mark, you run to the mark and hit the mark and then start running. Now really, it doesn't make a difference. It's all personal preference. The main thing is that it's consistent every time. So when you're doing your warm-up, you're at the start of your run, you have to do the same thing every time. So if you're going to stand here and stand still, you have a check mark at your first step going down. So if you're starting on your right foot first, you put a mark on the side of the runway, and every time you start your approach, you step out and hit that mark every single time. And you should have somebody watching you do it in practice also to make sure you're consistent. It's kind of hard to see where your foot is sometimes, especially when you're running at full speed. Now the same thing with the walk-up. Now if my run was going to start here, I might start walking from here first and say take 4 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, then go. The main thing is, again, to hit that mark. Now I also said you can start skipping. You might start skipping a little bit and then start running into your mark. Once again, the main thing is just hitting the mark each time. Now for me, when I competed, I did kind of a combination. I walked and then I had 2 skipping steps and I hit my mark each time. My mark is 24 feet, okay? That's how long my walk up is, and then my run was 156 feet. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I did. And the thing is, you can have your own personality on it. Some people like to create like a little rhythm, a little dance, because the approach is about your rhythm. So do what you want to do to make it fun. This is what I did. Before we get started, we got to figure out how many steps you want to take in your approach. Now, typically a high school athlete, you want to have them take no more than 16 steps, which would be 8 cycles for the beginning athlete. You might want to move them back to 9 cycles, which is 18 steps, or maybe even 10 cycles, but I wouldn't suggest more than 10 cycles for any athlete. And we talk about a cycle, what we're talking about is counting from when one foot picks up off the ground and that foot hits the ground again. Because it's kind of difficult to count every step. You don't want to go on the runway thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 all the way down. So you count just your jump foot. So you start running and you count every time your jump foot hits the ground. So you started running, you would count 1, 2, 3, that way with just your jump leg if you're a left foot jumper, or conversely if you're a right foot jumper. So try to make it more simple. So remember, 8 cycles to start off with. If the athlete's a little more experienced, go back to 9 cycles. And for most world-class athletes, it's 10 cycles, which is 20 steps. Okay, now let's start breaking down the approach. Now the approach is divided into 4 different parts. You have your drive phase, the transition phase, the attack phase, and then the takeoff phase, which is the penultimate step, or what I call the push-pull plant. We'll break that down later. Right now, let's start off with the drive phase. Now the drive phase is similar to a runner coming out of the blocks. You start down low, and then you slowly start coming up. It's called the drive phase because you're not sprinting, you're driving. You're pushing back against the ground, so it's as opposed to picking up the foot and pulling the ground. Okay, so the drive phase, you want to think about having the eyes down. Okay, you want to use that forward momentum. With your body leaning forward, you use that momentum to get your speed going. So you think about your shin angle. The shin angle is going to be going backwards as opposed to hitting underneath you. You're pushing back. Your hips are going to be tilted a little bit forward. You still want to keep that straight line from your head down to the ground. That gives you the most power. So eyes down, hips tilted forward, head down a little bit. And you also want to make sure you have big arms. Whenever you're driving out of the blocks or when you're in a driving position, you want to make sure your arms, your hands always come up to shoulder height. So if you're leaning forward, your shoulder down lower, but you still got to bring the arms up bigger. So just like come out of the blocks, make sure the hands come up to shoulder height. Okay? So think about pushing back, keeping the eyes down, and driving the arms back nice and big. Now, one way to work on the drive phase is to have your athlete or yourself stand on the balls of your feet, start to fall forward, and just before you feel like you're going to fall, pick up your foot, pick up the toe, dorsiflex, and pick up and push back into the ground, and try to push back into the ground, driving the arms to keep your momentum from falling over. So like I said, similar to being in the blocks in this position, when you come out, drive the arms big and pick up the feet. The same thing in the beginning of the approach. You start running, you're down, not as far, but you still want to keep your balance and keep your momentum by picking up your feet. So one way to work on that is to stand here, fall forward, and then pick up your feet and push back against the ground. I'm going to show another drill right now, how to work on the drive phase. But before I get started, I want to introduce one of my athletes, Grace Upshaw, 2-time national champion outdoors, 1-time indoors, as well as Olympic finalist and also world championship finalist also. Okay, so what Grace is going to do, we're going to pull the sled, and the sled really mimics the motion in the drive phase really well. Okay, Grace. If you don't have a sled, you can try different ways. You can use a jacket or a towel or some sweatpants or something like that. You can create resistance by just putting the towel or jacket around the athlete's waist and holding back. Have them lean forward a little bit so you catch their weight. Okay, and now go into your drive phase. You can hold them back this way and work on the drive phase that way also. Okay, now we're going to go to the transition phase. And basically the transition phase just means you're going from driving being down in this position, going from a drive phase to a sprint phase, or I call the attack phase. So in the transition, just like when you come out of the blocks, you're down in this position, you must start to come up slowly. You don't want to pop up too soon and ruin your rhythm and your momentum. So what I have my athletes think about doing, thinking about the running drills, you're driving in the drive phase, in the transition phase, you start to pick up the toe, dorsiflex, pick up and start to step up over the opposite knee and start to pull into hip extension. So you get your hips up nice and tall and you get your body up nice and tall. Now you're still keeping your speed though. You pick up speed slowly with each step. Now, so there's some different things you can think about when you're doing that. For me, when I competed, I would have my head down on the drive phase, and on the transition phase, I would start coming up slowly. I had 3 cycles on my transition phase, so I would think to myself, come up to the runway, that's one phase, and then my eyes would go down to the pit for the second, and then up on the horizon for the third. That brings you up slowly, because whenever your head goes, your hips are going to follow. So it's an easy way of getting your body from that from the drive phase to the sprint phase, a nice easy transition. One other way you might want to do it is tell the athlete to think about their eyes and looking at the numbers on the clock. If they're driving and they're looking down at 6 o'clock, then have them look up slowly to 5 o'clock, to 4 o'clock, and to 3 o'clock. Once again, you fooled your body into getting up into a nice sprint position without losing your balance or your rhythm. The next phase